Hello, and welcome to the pre-trip inspection training video. This video, along with Chapter 11 in your Arizona Commercial Driver's License Manual, will help you to pass the pre-trip inspection portion of your Arizona Commercial Driver's License test. The purpose of a pre-trip inspection is to ensure that the driver has the necessary skills required to inspect the vehicle before operating it safely on the road. Prior to the start of your test, be prepared. Make sure that you roll your windows down, turn the front tires all the way to the right, and pop the hood. Remember, this is a simulated test, and you will not be moving the vehicle at all during the pre-trip inspection test. During the test, you must point to and/or touch each item you are inspecting and fully articulate what you are inspecting for. If you do not do so, you will not get credit for that portion of the test. We're going to start at the front of the vehicle. We're going to look underneath the front of the vehicle, make sure we don't see any leaks. We're also going to check the lenses, make sure that there are no cracks or damage. Inside the hood, we're going to check the steering linkage. We're going to make sure that that has no damage or excessive wear. After the steering linkage, we're going to check the serpentine belt. We're looking for any frays, damage, and we're also making sure that it has no more than 3/4 to a full inch of play from side to side. That serpentine belt drives the alternator, the water pump, and the power steering pump. You must explain to the examiner that all three of those are belt driven, not gear driven. We're going to check the alternator. We're looking to make sure that it is mounted properly and that there are no damaged or loose wires. We're going to check the water pump, make sure that is properly mounted and that there are no leaks. And finally, we're going to check the power steering pump. We're going to make sure that that is mounted properly and there is no obvious damage. After we check the power steering pump, we're going to check the two hoses from the power steering pump to make sure that there are no cracks, frays, or damage, and nothing is leaking. Next, we have the upper and lower radiator hose. We're going to make sure that neither of those hoses are leaking and that there's no cracks or damage. Next, we're going to check the oil level. We're going to make sure that that is in operating range. After the oil, we're going to check the coolant. We're not going to remove any caps. We're just going to check the overflow to make sure that the coolant is in operating range. Next, we're going to move around to the front of the vehicle. We're going to inspect the windshield. We're looking for any cracks, any illegal stickers, basically anything that can obstruct your view. We're going to check the wiper arms and blades. We're checking the arms for proper spring tension. We're also going to check the blades for any cracks or damage. Now that we're down here, we're going to inspect the frame. We're looking for any cracks, damaged welds, or re-welds. Next, we're going to check splash guards and mud flaps. If they apply to your vehicle, make sure that they are mounted properly and that there's no damage. Next, we're going to be checking the shocks, the shock coils, and the mounts. We're checking the shocks for any cracks or leaks. We're checking the coils for any damage or missing coils, and we're checking the mounts for damage or excessive wear. Next, we're going to check the brake line. We're going to make sure there are no cracks, damage, or leaks. Please be sure to point out to the examiner where the brake line is so that the examiner knows that you know. This is where your brake pads are, and these are your rotors. We're going to check both of these for any cracks, excessive wear, or oil. Now we're going to inspect the tire. We're looking for inflation, condition, and depth. Make sure you tell the examiner that you're going to check the tire with a tire gauge to make sure that it's inflated properly to factory standards. We're checking the condition of the sidewall. We're looking for any bubbles, breaks, or cracks. And we're going to check the treads. We're going to make sure that the treads are worn evenly and that there is no less than 4/32 of an inch of tread depth. We're going to check the rim for any damage, cracks in any welds, or any re-welds. We're going to check the valve stem, make sure that has no cracks and it's not leaking. We're going to check the stud holes, make sure that they're not beveled out. Check the lug nuts, make sure that they're all present, that they're secure, and that there is no rust trails which would indicate a problem. Finally, check the hub seal, which is behind the hubcap, for any damage or leaks. Now we're going to check the driver door. We're going to open it up, make sure that it's mounted securely, make sure that it opens and closes properly. We're going to check our side view mirror for any cracks or obstructions in our view. And finally, we're going to check the door seal. We're looking for any cracks, missing pieces, damage in general. Moving inside the cab, we're going to check now for FET, which stands for fuses. Our fuses should be underneath the dash. We're going to check our fire extinguisher. We're going to make sure that it's properly rated, properly mounted and fully charged. And finally, we're going to check to make sure that we have 3 reflective triangles. We're also going to check our seat belt. We're going to make sure that it's properly mounted. We're looking for any cracks or frays, and we're going to make sure that it locks securely. Once inside the vehicle, you're going to want to turn it on to bring it up to operating range. But before that, make sure that we perform a safe start. Engage your parking brake and make sure the vehicle is in park before turning it on. Now that we're in operating range, we're going to check all of our gauges. We're going to make sure that all of the gauges work properly. We're also going to check the horn to make sure the horn is working properly. Another thing you need to inspect is the heater and the defroster. Turn both of those on to make sure that they're working properly. Finally, we're going to check our mirror, make sure there are no cracks or obstructions in our view, and our washer wipers. Now we're going to be testing the interior and exterior lighting. This is the only portion of the test that you may ask the instructor's help. Ask the instructor to go to the front of the vehicle. Check the headlights, the high beams, the left turn signal, the right turn signal, and the four-ways. While the instructor is looking for the lights on the exterior, you check the indicators on the dash. Now, have the instructor move to the rear of the vehicle. Check the brake lights, the tail lights, the left turn signal, the right turn signal, and the four-ways. There are 3 brake tests that must be performed while inside the cab. If any one of these brake tests is not performed before leaving the cab, you will be scored an automatic fail. And remember, these tests are simulated. Just explain to your instructor what you're going to be doing. First, we're going to check the hydraulic brakes. We're going to pump the brake pedal 3 times and then hold it down for 5 seconds, feeling for any loss of pressure. Second, we're going to check the emergency brake. We're going to engage the emergency brake and then try to pull forward to make sure the emergency brake is working. And finally, we're going to test the service brakes. We're going to put the vehicle in gear, pull forward at a rate of about 5 miles per hour, and then engage the brake to make sure that the vehicle stops and doesn't pull from side to side. Also, be sure to explain to your instructor that you are checking for the ABS light to make sure that it does not come on during the service brake portion of the test. Now that we've finished the in-cab portion of the test, we're going to check the fuel tank, which is located here between the bed and the cab. We're checking the tank itself to make sure that it's mounted properly, that there's no cracks and no leaks in the tank or any of the fuel lines. We're also going to check the drive shaft, which is underneath the truck. We're checking the drive shaft for any damage or excessive wear. Check the fuel door and the fuel cap. Make sure that the door opens and closes properly and that the cap locks into place and is mounted securely. Now we're going to check the rear suspension. Back here we have leaf springs, shocks, and U-bolts. We're checking the leaf springs for any damage and to make sure all of the springs are present. We're checking the shocks to make sure there's no cracks and leaks, and we're going to check the U-bolts to make sure that there's no damage and that they're mounted securely. Also, check the brake line in the rear. Make sure that this brake line has no cracks, no damage, and that it's not leaking anywhere. Now we're going to check the rear tires. Remember, ICD, inflation, condition, and depth. Be sure to tell the instructor that you'll be checking the inflation using a tire gauge. We're going to check the condition of the sidewall. We're looking for any bubbles, breaks, or cracks. And finally, we're going to check the depth of the tire tread. We're also going to make sure that the tread is wearing evenly. In the rear, you are checking for 2/32 of an inch of tread depth. Just like in the front, we have our brake pads and we have our rotors. We're going to check both of those for any cracks, damage, excessive wear, oil, or grease. We're going to check the rim for any damage, cracks in any welds, or any re-welds. We're going to check the stud holes to make sure that none of those are beveled out. We're going to check the lug nuts to make sure that they're all present, that they're mounted securely, and that there are no rust trails, which would indicate a problem. We're also going to check our valve stem, make sure that there's no cracks and no leaks. And finally, we have an axle seal behind the hubcap. We're going to check that to make sure that there's no damage and that it's not leaking. Finally, we're going to check our tailgate. We're going to make sure that it opens and closes properly and that it's securely mounted. And the last thing that we're going to check, and the only thing that you need to check on the passenger side of the vehicle, is the exhaust, which is underneath. Remember, the exhaust is hot, so you're going to put your foot on it and tell the instructor that you're just checking to make sure that it has no cracks and no leaks, and that it's mounted securely. And that concludes the pre-trip inspection training video. If you have any questions, please refer to Chapter 11 of the Arizona Commercial Driver's License Manual.